Hello class and welcome to our 7th lecture on macroeconomics, and I'm your instructor Jamal Haider. And during the following course we are following our textbook, that is Principle of Macroeconomics by Gregory Moncrief, and it's of 7th edition. And today our agenda is that we are going to finish chapter 13, which is savings, investments and financial system. So in this chapter we will look forward to answer the following questions, like what are the main types of financial institutions in a particular economy and what is their function? What are the three kinds of savings, and what's the difference between savings and investments, and how does financial systems coordinate saving and investments, and finally how do government's policies affect saving, investments and the real interest rates. Okay, to begin with, so financial system, that the group of institutions that helps match savings of one person with the investment of another. And financial markets, these are institutions through which savers can directly provide funds to the borrowers. So examples are the bond market and stock market. And what is bond? It is the certificate of indebtedness. It is a certificate showing that the amount owed and also interest and after some period of time. And the second one is the stock market. Stock market, in stock market, stocks are traded. What is a stock? Stock is a claim to partial ownership in a firm. So here different kinds of savings we have. So in general, savings is just some measure of income minus some measure of expenditures. So we have private savings. So private savings means the portion of household income that is not used for consumption or paying taxes. So for private savings, the measure of the income is disposable income or the gross income minus taxes. So here, for private savings, if we are talking about economy private saving, so it means GDP. GDP is also a measure of income and expenditure. Recall our previous discussion that in a closed economy, income is equal to expenses. So GDP is also a measure of income. So income minus taxes minus consumption. So we call that this is savings. And what is the explanation of this private savings? So for private household savings, the measure of income is basically disposable income that we already discussed that, or a gross income minus taxes means take home pay. So the measurement of expenditure is basically a consumption. And now we have public savings, which is tax revenue minus the government spending. So for public savings, how much is the income for the government? It imposes taxes. And what is the spending? The government spendings on it. So for public, or means government savings, the measure of income is T, and total taxes, which is the government's source of income. So here, the measure of expenditure is simply government purchases, which we represent G. So here we have US government debt. This is the example from your book, that the government finance deficit by borrowing. So when the government is borrowing, it means they borrow cash, issue some bonds. So persistent deficit leads to a raising government debt. If there is a persistent deficit, then government is issuing bonds. And the ratio of government debt to GDP is usually measure of government's indebtedness relative to the ability to raise tax revenue. And in order to pay back that deficits or that interest payments or pay back that loan, governments increase the taxes. So historically, the debt GDP ratio, it basically rises during wartime and falls during peacetime until the early 80s. So we have here a US government debt as a percentage of GNP, gross national product. It means all the income of the US nationals, irrespective of the borders, from 1790 to 2012. So if you see here, from the beginning of this long time series until about 1980s here, the data shows a clear pattern. Means the ratio jumps up during wartime and comes back down during peacetime. So there are two reasons why many economists believe it is appropriate to allow the debt ratio to climb during war times. First, it allows a government to keep tax rates smooth over time, and because wars are expensive and financing them solely with taxes increases would be disrupt the whole economy. So what happened? Second thing is that debt finance shifts part of the cost of the war for the future generation. So first one is that they smooth the tax rate because to finance war, so they cut off their some so they solely basically increase the taxes would disrupt the economy. So what happened? They would cause a substantial reduction in its economic development. So they just not let happen to increase the taxes, but wars are costly. So that's why all the tax revenue is going towards to finance war and deficits is growing. And second one is the debt finance shift part of the cost of the war for future generations, because in futures tax gonna rise. So this is appropriate, and one could argue that future generation benefit when the government goes to war to defend the nation against foreign aggressors. But the pattern is visible throughout most of the history breakdown around 1980s. So you can see the 80s here. So here, this was basically due to the Reagan's tax cut and growth in the federal entitlement outlay during 1980s. So this is just a part of your book, and try to read all this case from your book, and just try to understand that in wars, government's deficit increases. When government deficit increases, because this is a wartime, in order to avoid chaos, so they do not increase taxes. But in future, this tax burden going to be transferred for future generations. And this creates low funds for investments, because all the funds are used to finance wars. You can see here the debt to GNP or GDP ratio you can see that it is clicking upside during Civil War, World War I, and World War II, and also in the financial crisis of 2008. So the summary of this chapter is that the financial system is made up of many types of financial institutions like stock market, bond market, banks, and mutual funds. And then we discussed that the national savings is equal to private saving plus public saving. And in a closed economy, national savings equals national investment or just investments. The financial system makes this happen because the supply of loanable funds comes from savings, the demand for funds comes from investments, and the interest rate adjusts to balance supply and demand in the loanable funds market. Government budget deficit is negative public savings, so it reduces national saving, supply of funds available to finance investments. And when budget deficit crowds out, investment reduces, and it reduces the growth of productivity and GDP, and also reduces the standard of living. So here is the end of our chapter. So we have our assignments, which is MCQs, and also the chapter ends assignment, page 279 to 280. So solve these questions and also solve these concept checkers to enhance your knowledge. And we see you in our lecture 8. Class is over. See you next time. Bye-bye.